you know, okay, so if we know something like this, where is this public discourse that we should be having? You know, why aren't there congressional hearings? Why don't we have this airing out, especially on patriotic, you know, quotation news sources like Fox News? Why isn't there a bigger discussion going on? That's where I get suspicious. You see what I'm saying? The stuff you allude to sometimes, you know, I don't have the personal information necessarily to know whether or not that's true. I can sort of on face value say, well, there's something there, where there's smoke, there's fire. Where I go to is why don't certain systems necessarily then come into play when you would think they would? If we know now that suicide is very high amongst our soldiers, why isn't there a movement in the country to figure out why? Now, you can say intuitively, I know why, right? But you can also engage a system to say there must be a reckoning. There must be an accountability.
Exactly. Why don't they care? Why aren't they making that the story of the boy at the bottom of the well?
But we have to make that the story. That's what I'm saying. Look, you used to listen to the radio and you thought, you know what, I got something else to say. You started your own station, right? Okay. I used to look at rock and roll and say, I can do this better. I can do this different. I started my own rock and roll band, which turned into my own radio station, you see? So this is the thing. We need to start our own radio station. We need to start our own blog.
We all need to be the individuals we are, and that way the cookie-cutter Borg cannot overtake us. Very well said.
Yeah, see, that's why, and when we talked before, and I say this, don't get caught in this left-right stuff. You know what I mean? Look at a human being who's come back from a war. Whether or not you agree with why they were there, why they enlisted, you look at a human being, and you see that person hurting, and you do not lend your hand, okay? Then you're not in line with Christ or Buddha or whatever you believe in. You're not in line with that. You're basically falling into the same ditch that everybody else is in.
They divide and conquer us, and they do it scientifically.
If you lead with your heart, you'll see a person who's standing there that needs help, right? So if we look as a country at these wounded warriors, or, you know, or why are, like I think I saw on your site, or maybe it was Drudge, where these kids are now coming up with these GMO pesticides in their systems, okay? We need to do something about that. We need to stand up and, okay, in my case, I'm willing to put my public cachet out there and say, these are the questions that need to be asked. And then somebody's going to try to drill me from the left and drill me from the right because I'm not a scientist. Of course I'm not a scientist. I'm a rock star. I'm less than a scientist.
But
right?
You can go research the scientific reports that are out there.
You can ask the question, right? Okay, and then as an American public, if there's enough of us, we can demand an answer.
Sure.
Right?
Why is cancer increasing? Instead of looking for the cure, why aren't we looking for the cause? All right, Billy, I've got to throw this in here at the end. I've seen over 500 articles, literally, saying there are no drones. Now, the Washington Post announced $40+ billion to launch 30,000 of them in the next 8 years. They're arresting cattle thieves with them in North Dakota. They've got drones here in the town I live in. The police are now arming them. That's all over the news, but they've come out and said, oh my gosh, the farmers are all upset, and the American people are upset it's not happening. So I think they were trying to shove that down our throat. The backlash came, and so now they're saying everything is fine. But my point is, here babbling, is that things like the TSA groping us, things like checkpoints on highways or drones above us, I think fundamentally gets through to the public that, hey, this whole military system we've paid for to dominate the globe, it's now coming back on us. Your take on the drones, the TSA, and then anything else you'd like to add in closing?
You know, I think it's, look, there's an inevitability to what's going on. We all read 1984 in school, or Brave New World, where this kind of dystopia was sort of sketched out. Of course, in school we read these books with the idea that we'll never live in a society like this, and now we're waking up and realizing that we are. The cell job, of course, is going to be it's going to make us safer. If we all have some RFID chip on us, you know, no one will be able to commit a murder because we'll always know where everybody is. You know, or God forbid a kid goes missing. One of the worst things I can think of. We'll be able to trace where that kid went and who was with that kid. That's going to be the cell job. Now, we're going to have to make really critical decisions as a culture and a society and as a world populace, for what price freedom. So far in the last decade, since 9/11, the American public seems really okay with it, shockingly so. And it's difficult to imagine that we seem to be hurtling in this direction with no brake on. And certainly if there's a nefarious system that wants to put these things in place, they've seen the apathy. you remember there was that day, the protest, the TSA day, and all that, and unfortunately, millions of people didn't do anything, and that was the end of that. So if we know this is coming, at what point do we say no? At what point do we say we're not going to accept this anymore collectively? Because as individuals, you can sit there and bitch and moan all you want. If you're just going to be one hero standing alone in the wilderness, it's not going to work. It's going to take a collective effort, and it's going to take a synthesizing of voices that have a kind of a collective belief. It can't be that left-right stuff, because that's always going to break down into an argument. It has to be a fundamental belief that, it's like when we cross the street, we take a chance of getting hit by a car. It's just kind of part of what goes with crossing the street. You call it the nanny state. At some point, is the majority of our country, do they want to live in a nanny state? So far, the vote seems to be yes.
Specifically, you fly a lot. Do you have any horror stories with the TSA?
No, I'm lucky in that, I opt out. I refuse to walk through the scanning machines. I've read the scientific data. I've done my own research. I don't feel comfortable going through those machines. I've seen, where I've been radiated at other points in my life, just through X-rays and stuff, where it hurt my immune system. I have enough problems with that as it is, just by my schedule and my lifestyle. So I choose to opt out. 19 times out of 20, I've been treated very courteously and professionally, and so I don't have any particular complaint. That being said, I disagree with the idea. And, of course, what's really weird is then we go to Europe or other places, and the systems are different. So, again, just on logic, right, just on, normal human logic, why isn't there a homogenized system if the threat is the same? That's what I find curious.
Very well said. I'm going to let you go. Hopefully can talk to you when you get back to town. Hopefully someday we run into each other again. And I'll say hi to Mancow to you. This is off air. And I can cut this in anywhere. But anything else you want to add? Billy, anything else that you would like to impart to the audience or try to get folks to think about?
If I had any just general message from my perspective, it's that we all have to take responsibility, and we all have to do something. In my case, I'm willing to talk about these things openly and kind of sit more in the energy of hope, but not the Pollyanna version. I believe in the goodness of most people. There is evil in the world, and if God has taught us anything, the only way to combat evil is to be better than evil with light and love. And so we must embrace our families, our communities. We must really care about our brothers and sisters, and if we don't, then we are just, as was once famously said in the 60s, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
Well said. It's Hunter S. Thompson quote, trust in God, but roll away from the rocks. So the Bedouin saying that he was paraphrasing, trust in God, but tie up your camel. Yes, trust, but you've got to have right action. Billy Corrigan, smashingpumpkins.com. Again, congratulations on your new record. I love it, and it's definitely in my playlist. Thank you so much for spending time with us, and be safe down in South America.
Thank you, Alex. God bless. Bye-bye.
Folks, there goes Billy Corrigan. Well, now that Mr. Corrigan has left us, I've got a few things to say about him. He really does have courage. For every 10 or 15 famous people that we end up getting contacted by or that I run into and talk to who are awake, maybe one of them is willing to come on the show. Because the system does come after you. But we're going to lose everything if we don't reverse what's happening. If the globalists don't realize that their system is insane and that even though they think they're in control of it, the blowback is going to destroy them as well as us. And, Billy talked about, well, people didn't stand up, so nothing happened. That was the one point I disagreed with him, but we didn't have time in the interview to get into it. I, with others, helped organize the National Opt-Out Day. And for more than 2 weeks, they just turned the scanners off almost everywhere. For 2 days, the day of Thanksgiving and after, they totally turned them off. And there's lawsuits over that. Bob Barr is suing them to get the documents, to find out why they did that. But the answer is pretty simple. They didn't want to give us a chance to start a new civil rights movement. They didn't want to give us a chance to really show our power. That's what they do. Every time we try to take the field against the New World Order, and we're going to win, they back off. They disappear. They strike when they want to strike. It's a guerrilla war on us. It's jungle hit-and-run attacks. We've got to do the same thing in the info war. Every little thing you do where you're individualistic, where you don't just put something out that was pre-programmed, sabotages their system of predicting what we're going to do and how our social movements operate. Let me tell you, I was impressed by that interview, and I'm very impressed by Billy Corrigan and this new album. In fact, I think it's probably the best album he's ever put out, even better than the stuff that came out in the early and mid-'90s. And it's good to have people like him out there who are reaching millions of others with the message of think for yourself. All right, here we go, folks. Here it is from the new Smashing Pumpkins album. Get it at smashingpumpkins.com. And in closing, it is a fact that governments are the #1 cause of death when special interests control them. The University of Hawaii has done the studies. There's other studies out there. 260+ million people were killed by government in non-military action. That's a few hundred million more. Civilians, innocent people, 200+ million were killed by governments, shot, starved to death, killed. That's not counting carpet bombing and things like that, or Hiroshima, Nagasaki. 260+ million people. That's how many have been killed via democide. And that's a term almost no one even knows. You know all about serial killers. You know all about not trusting your neighbor. You know all about Al-Qaeda. Better chance of being killed by a honeybee sting. Look at the statistics on that. You know all about things that are non-existent. It's like Jaws. For 2 years after that movie came out in the early 70s, they had over 50% less people at the beaches in the United States. Same thing in Australia, other areas. Because people thought that big gray shark was out there and was going to eat them. Less than 5 people die a year on average worldwide from great whites. But because there's so much coverage, you know about it. And even when I'm out in the ocean, I sometimes kind of think about it. Even though I consciously know I've got a better chance of being hit by a meteorite or struck by lightning twice than I do being eaten by a great white. It's a total joke, ladies and gentlemen. Why am I bringing up democide? Why is democide so important? Because we're told the drones, the checkpoints, the police state, all of this is for our safety, but the #1 historical threat in history is governments setting up these police states for our supposed safety. And now the Pentagon admits they want regular Army and Marines in every city to respond to terrorists. And they say the new terrorists are the American people. So all their excuses of taking our liberties and freedoms for our safety are frauds. The #1 threat is this national security state run by the private mega banks that are monopoly men. We're told to fear our neighbors. We're told to fear, the evil Arabs, as they call them. We're told to fear all of this, but we should fear big government. Our founders, 235 years ago, they knew the big threat. Read what Thomas Jefferson said. Read what George Washington talked about. Read what other philosophers, Victor Hugo in France, talked about. The state is the big threat because it can get away with almost anything. It controls the military. It controls the police. And when special interests get control of it, look out. That's our talk with Billy Corrigan, and that's my addendum to it. I want to thank Billy for spending time with us here on the air. And we will take you back now to the live radio show, Infowars.com.